Well, welcome everyone for this final interview. I think we had a really interesting day, a 4 hours marathon, but almost it sounded like 4 years. So now here with Mirjam Staub-Bisang from BlackRock. Pleasure to have you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We discussed about, central bank policy and purpose, but I think here it's much more personal questions on what makes you stay awake at night. Why are you still motivated to go to work the day after, the night after, and what is maybe just the messages you would like to send out? So let me put it a bit into frame. If you start with something more pessimistic, and if you look a bit, the risk that we all have observed, and you have also observed over the last years, you have been in business for a long time. How do you see this risk have evolved?
Thanks for this very interesting question. And it's really so that in investing, people always say, oh my God, this is the most difficult time to invest. It's never been so unclear. And really, I've been in this investing business, let's say, it's called that way, for 20 years. And it was always a difficult time. And with hindsight, it was always so clear what to do. But if it were clear, then probably it wouldn't be a good investment either. So when we just look at the more recent time, I would say, and we look at the last 2 years, and I recall very well, because that's kind of my, I would say my time scale, when in January 2020, we came out, BlackRock came out with Larry's letter to CEO, CEOs, usually that happens around the WEF. And it was a very, very strong statement of our sustainability and climate strategy, our investment beliefs. And here the investment belief, climate risk is investment risk. Sustainability risks are investment risks. And as a fiduciary investor, sustainable investing is our standard. Boom. That was a huge, I think a huge statement which really, went around the globe. And then at the WEF, everything was about climate. Remember Greta and the Trillion Tree Initiative, Trump with the Trillion Tree Initiative. And I remember at the time I felt, wow, this is great. We're doing sustainability, we're doing climate risk. Now we have climate risk in the focus of everyone. This is going to be a really fast track. And then two months later, right, we were all shut down, locked down, and COVID hit. And I think at that point we realized how fragile the world is. And suddenly, it wasn't all about climate, it was about health. It became very personal, and people started to worry, and suddenly you didn't know who you could trust. You couldn't hug anymore, you couldn't go out, and life really changed. And for us, really engaged in sustainability and climate finance, we thought, oh my God, this is the end of climate finance. It's going to be very much out of focus, and everything we'll focus on is health and getting back on track. But then I think this is the climate train, if I may say. It's really a train that has left the station, and it's not going to stop, and it's not going to return. And you see that once I think we got a grip on COVID and start to dabble back into a more normal world, you see the focus back on climate and how we need to fight climate change. And I think actually that experience with COVID and the concerted action that you could see from governments, but also from the real economy, labs working together, trying to find the vaccine. I think that experience probably makes me hopeful, and you can see I'm more an optimist than a pessimist.
We come to that in the next question, right? The
yeah, but it makes
side.
me hopeful, that with this concerted effort, of governments, investors, the real economy, academia. Yeah. If we all go together, we will find solutions, and we will bring about the necessary change. Yeah.
No, I will not stop this interview by just emphasizing the pessimistic side, but maybe just to summarize, I think, so the climate risk, when they became financial risk, this is probably where you, BlackRock, woke up a lot of investors aside
exactly. From you. And here, as the world's largest asset manager, all the money we manage, it's not our money, it's always the money of somebody else. So we're always acting as a fiduciary. And as a fiduciary, our mandate is to maximize long-term value, long-term risk-adjusted value for our investments. And when we started to really define climate risk, look at climate risk so carefully, we realized this is investment risk, and we have to take it into account, because only as a prudent investor we have to take climate risk and sustainability risks into account. If we don't do that, we're not doing a good job.
You're violating your fiduciary duty.
Absolutely.
We talked about risk, systemic risk. You came quickly to climate risk. You also said you're an optimist. So I am. So what is the climate opportunity? What are the positive side that you see within or because of all of these crises and risk? I mean, there must be also a positive side in all this evolution and crisis we had.
Yeah, and here I think as an investor, let me first speak as an investor, but then we also can come to the real economy and society. But as an investor, every risk also provides the opportunity. And when we think about climate risk, we think about transition risk to assets. We think about physical risks as well, and all the damage, say storms and droughts and so on to buildings. But let's put that aside. Let's think about the transition risk and what it means for assets. It means if you're kind of on the wrong side of the equation, yes, you're going to end up with stranded assets. What are stranded assets? For example, coal assets that are getting disposed of by investors, and eventually they will drop in value, and you don't want to end up with that in your portfolio from a risk perspective. So we need a lot of innovation, and we need a lot of innovative technologies to help industries, to help companies to decarbonize and to actually fulfill their net zero commitments. We all want to live in a low carbon world, and for this companies need to change, and for this we need technology. To be a technology investor is then to be on the good side of the equation.
Okay, talking about enablers, so you mentioned technology. What are you doing as BlackRock? What are the levers you are deploying on a regular basis to help this transition happening, turning climate risk into opportunities? What are the tools that
I think that's a great question. Here again, there are two answers. The obvious one is we deploy capital. We deploy capital into climate solutions, innovative companies, be that private capital or be that investments in listed companies. So we provide capital. But then I think even probably more effective is what we do as shareholders. So as the world's biggest asset manager with approximately 10 trillion in managed assets, about 3/4 of these assets are managed in index funds, ETFs, index solutions. And with this capital, we don't have the opportunity to divest. We invest based on an index, and if the index has fossil fuel assets or energy or coal assets or cement assets in there, that's what we invest in. But what we can do is, again, as a fiduciary investor for our clients, we can engage, and we do engage with the management and the boards of these companies and say, look, as we believe climate risk is investment risk, we want to make sure that in the portfolios of our clients, the climate risks are managed well and are mitigated. So we expect from you to tell us how you see the climate risks for your company and what your strategy is to mitigate it. We would like to have companies to commit to net zero goals, net zero 2050 goals, and ideally we would like to see companies to pursue a decarbonization path which is in line with science-based targets. That's what we would like to do.
That's what we love to hear. We are a scientific organization, right? So whenever you have science as a grounding element, that helps to also have credibility in place. So engagement is certainly, and stewardship is a key element. Probably better than just dropping the asset, excluding it. That's also my naive understanding. Everyone is talking about decarbonizing portfolios. But if I decarbonize, then it means I am selling shares and someone's buying them. So there's not a genuine decarbonization, right?
Exactly, because somebody else is holding the asset. And I think that's right now kind of a big conundrum and what investors and companies kind of struggle with. And a pension fund actually said, a large pension fund, Canadian pension fund, said, I think something which resonated very well with me. He said, the manager of the pension fund said, well, a low carbon portfolio is at odds with the transition. That's a very controversial statement because on the one hand, you want to have a low carbon portfolio, not to be exposed to these transition risks. But then who owns these assets? That's the big question. I don't have an answer to that yet, but I know a lot of people are thinking about the right solution because you don't want these dirty assets to end up in the hands of not responsible investors.
Lower responsibilities then, absolutely. And I think maybe to conclude this as well, I think we also did some empirical research and we also emphasize engagement is much more effective than exclusion per se or per default, right? And so I think I can assume you're really trying to accompanying low and heavy carbon emitting companies on their transition that we all need to undertake.
No, and that's what we do. We force them to think about their risk. We force them to think about their mitigation strategies. And if they're not taking actions, we are willing to vote against them. And you could have seen that recently in the General Assembly of ExxonMobil, where you had this shareholder proposal led by an activist hedge fund, but then followed by large investors like BlackRock, and eventually kind of board members with a green agenda were voted on the board against the board's proposed candidates. So, that's very, very powerful. And I think companies all over the world saw what happened there and how powerful the investors can be on a sustainability agenda. And I think it will make them take investors with their sustainability claims very seriously going forward.
So you're really a positive thinking person, you're an optimist on this journey.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mirjam Staub-Bisang from BlackRock for E4S.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.